Welcome to Tenacity with Sonia C, the podcast where entrepreneurs, founders, and ambitious professionals come to learn from those who have walked the path, navigating challenges and achieving success. Whether it's thriving in business, pivoting, scaling for growth, fundraising, or finding work-life balance, dealing with loneliness, adversity, or overcoming personal struggles. Our guests share the insights and strategies that have empowered them to level up. I'm your host, Sonia, and let's get started. My guest today is Brittany Greenfield. Brittany is the CEO and founder of Wabbi. She is recognized as a top woman in cybersecurity and one of Boston's Business Journal's 40 Under 40. She's known for her bold leadership and innovative approach to integrating cybersecurity into software development life cycles. Today, we'll dive into her journey as a founder, her challenges, and her vision for the future of cybersecurity. Hi, Brittany. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing, Sonia?
I'm good. I am so excited for our conversation. You're a woman in tech. I'm a woman in tech. This is going to be so much fun.
It will be. We've got to support each other in this. I don't mean to be bleak about it, but there's just some shared experiences that we go through, and I think it's important to lift the lid on them and not be afraid to talk about them, because there's so many people out there that are dealing with it.
Absolutely. Before we get into it, can you just tell our audience a little bit about you and what you do in case they don't know anything yet?
Yep, my career in tech has not been linear by any means. I got into the cloud startup space at a time where I had to explain that working in the cloud was not working for the Weather Service or being an astronaut, and startups were not a standard part of our lexicon. And I was like, in 5 years, you guys will get it. Just stop asking questions. And since then, I've really matured into the person that goes and finds the next big problem for a company to solve and figures out how we go attack it and herds the cats to go get there. And I've always done it in enterprise software, but transitioned into cybersecurity while I was getting my MBA. Just fell in love with the area of it, and so eventually I ended up starting my own company, which one of our investors said, "Of course you did, Brittany. You've been doing that for other companies. You just hadn't had your own moment." And I went, "Wait, but I'm not a hoodie wearing guy in a basement writing code, right? I'm a technical person, but that's not me." And they went, "Yeah, no, it's okay. You're a business leader that knows how the sausage is made, but also knows how to align that with actually solving a problem." So that led me to be the founder of Wabbi, which is in what's known as the application security space. So how we actually develop code securely, kind of like building a secure and safe house.
So I know that a lot of people don't realize that when you're building code or you're building any type of application, considering cybersecurity while you're building the code is really important. What led you to integrate software development lifecycle with cybersecurity and get into all of that?
It's so important. I'm glad you said that, right? We had this whole modernization of software development. For those that are in the space, you know that as DevOps, or just nowadays development. And it's so focused on that quality component. Are there four walls and a door? Therefore, I can call it a room. It has a window and a closet. Therefore, I can call it a bedroom. But security got left behind in that conversation. And so while structurally, yes, it was a room or a house or a commercial building, we didn't know if it was safe inside the walls. And I was in a different area of cybersecurity called the endpoint space, which very topically, for those listening, that's where CrowdStrike is. And I used to be in that space, and I think it's pertinent.
Oh.
About now. Yep. I used to work for a direct competitor, so I know. So I've been geeking out a bit the last couple of days. And everybody was talking about the defensive line, right? Which, back to the house analogy, is like installing some kind of home security system. That's about when you get breached, not how do we de-risk our opportunity for breach. And that's where security needs to be integrated into software development. When 9 out of 10 breaches begin due to these defects in code, we've got to find a better way to make security accessible for development, because we shouldn't expect them to suddenly become SMEs, as well as to scale security teams, which in the United States alone, we're dealing with a 3 million person shortage. So how can we do that? And that's where Wabbi was born out of, to solve both problems without actually asking people to change their behaviors, because we know changing human behavior is the hardest problem to solve.
Yeah. So, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced when starting Wabbi, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges was we weren't the first player in the space, and not getting caught up by trying to do a better version of what other players that hadn't necessarily succeeded done, right? Not just building a better mousetrap. And so the first thing I did was, especially being somebody that left code writing long ago, I said, I'm going to do customer advisory boards just as I have in these large enterprises, and get down to, brass tacks. Don't just tell me that you want security to speed up, because as we know, quite often customers don't actually articulate the problem. They just say that I need security to match the speed of my development. Well, often they got speed and velocity confused. And that's doing the right thing at the right time. So overall, you save time, even if in the moment, sometimes that means slowing down. So we went back to good old fashioned whiteboarding, wireframes. I eventually got to an interactive wireframe, and it was great because if I didn't do that, I would have just done a me too of a product that wasn't great on the market. I think the second thing, talking about being a woman in tech, and especially a woman in cyber, where less than 25% of the workforce is female. I actually had the misconception that, hey, I'm somebody that actually knows what I'm talking about. Cyber, you either know what you're talking about or you don't. I won't have any of those female funding issues. And unfortunately, it's actually been the reverse. So as a result, we've done something very different. We've bootstrapped a lot, ran a really lean model, and you're seeing it's actually protected us against overinflated valuations. Now, it certainly is challenging when your competitors are out there sitting with 35 million in the bank, and spending on marketing or whatnot, or being able to hire ahead of milestones. But in cyber, if you look at any given half year of cyber transactions, venture transactions, it is more than the last 10 years of investment in women in cybersecurity. And I just, and so as a result, there are certain things that you're missing. It's not just the investment. That means that it's harder to connect with other female founders in cybersecurity. And as we know, it does take a community, it takes a village. And, I think that's where, those have been some of the biggest stumbling blocks for me, which I admittedly went in blindly going, it's cyber, you either know your stuff or not.
Yeah. Well, you're a champion for women in technology. How do you see the industry evolving in terms of diversity and inclusion, specifically in cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think it's really important, right? For me, the diversity is not just for the postcard of it. It is for the diversity in thought and diversity of experiences. And something that I like to talk about a lot in tech is that the beauty of tech, and especially cybersecurity, is that there is no formal training for it. Most of it is on the job training. Sure, you can get some certifications to get your frameworks and get your fundamentals in, but it's on the job training, which means that it should actually be easily accessible to a lot of folks. Now, what we have to do in broader tech and cyber is find the way to bring down those hurdles that make somebody say, I don't want to apply. And especially with women, I'm sure you've seen this stat before. I said many of your listeners, women feel that they have to meet 100% of a job description to apply, versus men meet 60%. And so some of that's adjusting the job description. So something we've done actually at Wabbi that I encourage all organizations to do is actually hire for outcomes. So rather than saying you need 3 to 5 years in computer science, say, hey, I actually need somebody with technical orientation that is good at problem solving, and maybe is good in staying calm in situations of stress. Who might that be? Oh, that might be a mother returning to the workforce, right? That's been balancing a household, and she can catch up on the technical component, but what you can't teach is problem solving, time management, calm under pressure and those sorts of things. So I think that's one of the biggest things. And it's one of the reasons I enjoy talking with folks like yourself, is that we can destigmatize what it looks like to be in tech. As I said, I wasn't a hoodie wearing person, right? And I went, I can't possibly be a founder. I don't match that. So don't think anybody is above feeling restricted by the stereotypes that are out there. Anybody can be in tech. And one of the best examples I love to give is we have some developers who have college age young women. And well, my daughter loves to draw and is a sociology major. I was like, sign her up for UI UX, right? She understands
Yeah.
human behavior and loves to translate it into stuff, right? And that's it. I think that's the cool thing about tech now, that there's so many different avenues you can go into as well, and really just promoting awareness on that.
That's very true. I'm on the board of a non-for-profit organization called Hacker Gals.
Okay.
And what they do is they created these after-school programs for girls, and
Mhm.
they teach them how to code from the
Yep.
grade 6 level to high school. And really, it's to get girls curious about coding and wanting to, go into college, university programs for
Mhm.
engineering and all that, and really encouraging them to love it. And they have hackathons, and they give away scholarships to
Right.
the girls that went. And I just think that's like really where we need to start as well. Like, as women in leadership positions, we have to promote it and be part of it. And then in the hiring process as well. Because if we're not setting the example and trying to make change, then really who's going to do it, right?
Exactly. I think you've hit the nail on the head on two problems. One, there's the funnel problem, getting people onto the ladder, and then two, there's the broken rung problem. And it's not just at the leadership level, right? You're seeing half of women under the age of 35 in tech leave by the age of 35, right?
Wow.
That is a real problem. So, and then you're also seeing, I'm probably going to screw up the stat a little bit, but it's actually about at parity for women going into comp sci majors, but then they choose not to go into careers in development, and potentially not even in technology. And so there's a lot of steps along the way. And I love what you do with the Hacker Girls. We do something actually similar with underrepresented communities, with middle schoolers, rather than necessarily about coding. What are the opportunities in technology? And so we do sort of a day in the life, and they rotate through our different departments for an afternoon. First of all, God bless teachers. They really do have eyes in the back of their head. I was exhausted after half a day of that. But they see that there are multiple avenues in. They spent time with our developers. They spent time with our product management team, with our marketing team, with our general, back of house team. They see that there are multiple ways to engage in technology, and that this is how the things that they engage with, right? Whether it's, Netflix and Bluey on their tablet, or, the phones when they steal it from their mom, they start to see how it comes together, and they go, oh, that's really cool. I want to now go find a program, etc.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly. So I want to talk about development a little bit. So I know that a lot of people hear about cybersecurity. I'm not sure if everyone really understands it. A lot of companies are trying to be more careful about it because there's hacking going on with governments and very large companies, and these hackers want very large amounts of money. But one problem that I still see in cybersecurity space is we work, so my company, we do software development,
mhm.
and we work mostly in North America, so Canada and the US. But a majority of our clients are clients who have offshored their development
Yep.
and now feel like either they didn't get what they expected, or they didn't get built in with cyber security. And I have a case study for that right now. I'm actually working with a client that's building something very unique, but we're reviewing the source code, and we're like, and he's like, I really need the cybersecurity part to be part of the code. So for those of us who don't understand, there is
development with cybersecurity in mind, and then there's hosting for cybersecurity. Can you tell our audience the difference?
Yeah.
Because I still feel like people don't understand.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Cybersecurity is one, you've done a great job of distilling it, but it's this one big alphabet soup. And the cool thing about cyber is also that it always has to be one step ahead. So added to that, AI comes out. Now you have new alphabet soup. And so there's two components of it. And I'll go back to that house analogy. There is the rules and processes. So if you're building a house or renovating a house or building a commercial building, you have even sometimes down to the local neighborhood regulations that you have to follow. But regulations don't tell you necessarily to use a certain kind of nail or a certain kind of hammer. That's where the companies make a decision. And that is the actual hosting of it. Those are words like firewalls or network security that you might hear about, container security. Now, where the two come together is at some point in time, and this is where development has their role. If you want somebody to use a certain kind of code or firewall configuration or whatnot, you have to communicate that to development and explain to them, because again, they're not cybersecurity experts, nor should they be, right? They're experts in developing code, and that's what their specialty is. How to actually do it and why they need to do it. And that's sort of this Venn diagram that we're seeing merging, that it used to be security and development were two different worlds. In fact, early pitch decks of Wabbi's had a picture of two people fighting each other, right? Because it was, inherently development's job is to get things out, right? It's managing that component of business risk, which is not failure of delivery. And security's job is to stop things from coming in.
Yeah.
And so that's where you're finally seeing this convergence, and the world is called application security. You're hearing the term DevSecOps, right? Which is how people are, culturally trying to say you got to put security in it. And say, hey, if you actually want to build and configure these taller walls and deeper moats, you have to coordinate with the development team because that's who does it. However, we can't secure everything.
Yeah.
A lot of people may think about their bank account and they log in to manage their money and they go, okay, well, the bank's just securing that, right? They sort of look at it in this bulbous way. Well, what they don't know is that the menu is regulated differently from that dashboard. Bill pay and wires, we see it as an end user as, hey, you're just taking money out of my account to pay somebody else. But if nothing else, because wires are regulated separately, that's secured separately, right? And then there's the experience thing. You need something to be immediate with a wire versus bill pay is batched overnight. It gets highly, highly nuanced. And this has been some of the trouble of integrating security because it exceeds human capacity. It's not the human's fault that they can't imagine this tiny, tiny situation. And therefore, in the absence of a practical way to implement it, development teams have continued to go on, and security teams have been playing catch up.
Yeah, I'm always baffled by companies that are building software without any documentation. Because to me, the standard process is you have a business analyst who's putting together the documentation so that the developers can take that documentation and build on it, right? Not just tell them what to do. So to me, it's like common sense that when the business analyst is putting together the documentation, all of that is being put as a regulation that needs to be part of the code. Now, with that being said, I get this question a lot, and I'm going to ask it to you. Is there a difference between the type of coding language? So, you have like PHP and .NET. Does it make a difference which language you're using when it comes to cybersecurity?
No, because you articulated this perfectly. Good cybersecurity is actually about good process, because we can't eliminate risk from everything, but what we can do is manage it and make educated decisions. Our CTO says this about the engineering organization all the time. We set processes because that's how we get things out. Well, that's true of every business. And this is where we got some kind of disconnect when it came to security, because security has their own processes, right? Including the process for when the thing wasn't done. and so it really, obviously, there are ways that you will implement your security guardrails differently depending on the type of code or the container you use or whatnot. But the end of the day, it's about good hygiene. Do I have a process in place? Have I informed the people that are responsible for executing that process of their role in that process? And then do I have a system of checks and balances, which could be automated or they could just be manual? Well, to make sure that that process went to plan. And when it doesn't go to plan, where does it go then? And, it's a challenge that we've actually seen. And I alluded to the scale issue with cybersecurity professionals earlier too. It's a challenge we've seen is that a lot of times when you're dealing with scale, the process ends with Sonia knows what to do when this process fails, right? So God forbid you go to the bathroom or take vacation or ever want to sleep.
That's already tough enough.
Right. And so that's where we've started having this disconnect because especially as development teams started moving so much faster, or security teams got more into firefighting mode where they're trying to be super responsive and trying not to be a bottleneck, but best of intentions without a process, without automation. This is where technology helps support the advancement of both of these teams because it's going to make both of them more scalable. I think we saw it acutely post-COVID when you had people working on disparate work schedules, right? So the security person, let's pretend there was one security person for every one developer, which doesn't make any sense. Well, they may not be working on the same schedule, or you talked about with offshoring in the same place. So how do you still couldn't, it still wouldn't solve that problem of just good hygiene and good process and information. That's all we really need at the end of the day. We're not going to eliminate the cyber risk, but we're going to manage it better.
Yeah. And what would your advice be for a startup that's building a SaaS-based product, for example, and they went sort of the cheap route and used like some open source stuff in there? What would be your advice for them to, get their cybersecurity somewhat in place so that they reduce their risk?
Yeah, it's never too early to start.
Yeah.
And this goes back to process. It can be an Excel or Google sheet where you just document all of this and you have that moment where you take the time, be willing to, I think startups especially, because it's all go, 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 right? Be willing to take that moment to sit down with your team. We do this, right? Nobody's immune to the go, go, go syndrome at any point. Sit down with your team and go, hold on one second. Did we actually do what we said we were going to do, or did we let something go through the cracks because we thought we were prioritizing? And if it's okay if we made an educated decision on that, but if it just happened, then we didn't do it right. And the same is true in security. It's never too early. You can use open source software, right? 80 to 90% of software is built out of open source. But again, make sure you have the right risk mitigating controls in place, that you're accepting it, that you're doing it knowingly. The other beauty of cyber and development now is there are actually a lot of free tools out there, or low tiers where they're free for you and will grow with you. So there's not an excuse of cost. So again, use it, but use it within your own risk profile. There's no excuse for not thinking about these things early on. And it becomes harder to unravel the longer you let it go.
This is very true. How important is cybersecurity for an investor?
Oh, for an investor, I'll tell you a great story, right? God, it's really important, right? They're dealing with financial tools and a lot of cash, right? So, right, VCs are essentially financial services folks, right? Even though they have technology expertise in their area. I got a phishing email from one of my investors, from one of the partners who I fortunately do not typically work with. And what a lot of those emails are looking at, and they happen to do a holiday, here are our port codes sort of thing. So it was really easy for somebody. Turns out every port code got the same email, and they just flipped 2 letters in the domain. So if you looked at it and, the big boss emails you and you go, oh my God, do I need to respond right now? Take a deep breath. And this is true, right? Whether it's those dumb text messages you get, phishing emails, the calls, take a deep breath. And they're relying on you having this moment of anxiety to do the wrong thing. So it's super important with investors. I was talking to another investor when we were at our conference. She said, I've got to send a wire to a new portco. Oh, but I can't do it here because I can be on a public network, right? So it's important to have those things in, and especially being at our industry conference, there's always some jerk sitting out there going, oh, I can't wait to intercept this and prove that I got it. So don't think that because you're not writing code that you're not susceptible to this. I think, and again, investors, and we talked about it taking a village, investors should also be leading by example with their portcos, that it's never too early, and security is always an important thing.
Love it. I mean, I totally get it. I actually had one of my employees get an email from me, and they actually thought it was me, and they went out and did what the person told them to. And I was like,
no.
And it's so funny because the person who sent the email totally forgot that the bottom of the email said sent from my iPad.
And are you an Android user?
Oh, I'm an iPhone user actually, but at the office we're Microsoft, right? So I always use Outlook, but they just didn't even look at it, and they automatically thought it was me because they saw my name.
Right.
They didn't look at the email address, everything, because they were so nervous, which is what you're speaking to, right?
Oh, I have 1,000 stories, including people in industry, right? They sit out there waiting for somebody new and I know somebody that's been in the industry for, I don't know, 20 years, and, got a call from new boss, or text message, pardon, from new boss. Hey, I'm on the way to our event, right, which was publicly on their website. Can you pick up some gift cards for it? And she got all the way to the checkout line, and she said, what am I doing? She called the guy in the office and said, hey, is she in? No. Do you know what these gift cards are about? She's like, yeah, no. She's like, I am now embarrassed. I will now hang my head in shame. But at least she stopped herself. I can't believe this. I've been doing this for 2 years. But, I was driving. I wasn't thinking. And that's really where it's, we talk about vulnerabilities in code. It's also talking about human vulnerability. And, there's 1,000 reasons, good and bad, that humans can execute a mistake. But that's really, talking about risk mitigation. Let's try to make it as easy for the humans that we have in our lives to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And put in those safeguards so that if somebody does get through, and a friend of mine has to file a special physical tax report for 7 years because they got through to somebody in finance and filed fake tax reports with his Social Security. And they, how can we put in that second level of safeguard? So when the human makes an error, because humans make errors, how do we have another level of safeguards, right? And that's not necessarily some big fancy firewall. That's we need a second sign off, or do we have MFA or whatnot? And I think, you talked about so many people being unfamiliar with cyber still. I'd like to also demystify that. It doesn't have to be scary. It's just good common sense with slightly different implementations.
Love it. So can you share a moment in your entrepreneurial journey where you faced significant adversity and how you managed it to navigate through it?
Yeah. Oh God, one moment. I think that's the definition of the entrepreneur's journey is adversarial moments where you rise from them. There's a point in time, right? No, this is not I lecture at one of our local universities and say, look, you're going on the entrepreneurial journey and you think it's this beautiful road into the sunset and the mountains and whatnot that I put up, but actually it's this harrowing road, with switchbacks and everything. And, I think there's two things, we had one of those moments and it was perfect storm of some bad employees, late cash flow, sales weren't quite hitting. And I say bad employees, wrong fit employees, right? And so everything came together and we had to have the tough conversation with our board and they put me back on my heels and they made me feel bad, which as the leader, it's my responsibility, leader, founder, and it wasn't about that. But what I did, I relied on them so much for counsel that I'd forgotten to go out to what I call my personal board of advisors. And I took that moment, a lot of tears, and went out to my personal board of advisors and said, what's going on? I need to digest this. One of them said, hey, don't you remember you told me about this employee snapping at you 3 months ago when you asked for some of this information. Oh my God, thank you. Right. Okay. I'm not crazy. Right. This did not happen overnight. I'm not crazy. And you'd been working with her on it and whatnot. Yeah. Okay. Great. Then I went to another one and said, okay, hold on a second. You're not the first person to go through this. Here are some steps. Let's talk through it. Let's get this person on the phone, this person on the phone. And, everybody always talks about being a CEO, being a leader is very lonely, especially a founder. But remember, just because it's lonely doesn't mean you're doing it alone. And I think that's been the biggest thing to remember in those moments, which are probably the toughest times to ask for help, to go out and say, hey, I've got all these people that have supported me, brought to where I am today. Of course, they're going to support me when I have trouble. And that is, I have to tell myself, do as I say, not as I do. I'm not great at doing it, but I have to remind myself of that. Every time I have a question, there is somebody out there willing to help me because they believe in me and they've been there before, even if it's a totally different scenario.
So quick question about that. What did you do and how did you find a personal support for yourself?
I realized, and I think this was actually something unique about the founder's journey. I realized that I'd always had them. I collected them, so to speak, over the years. And when you're not in the founder's seat, it's more informal, right? Hey, let's grab a coffee, catch up, or whatever, whatnot. So you're drawing on these people. And I think people always look for mentors, which are really, really important. But the mentors that will show up are the ones that you're never necessarily searching for. You just hit it off. It's that person that you casually catch up with and maybe it's like a best friend, right? You just talk. And those are the people that you collect. And that's, I think, what was difficult when I became a founder, that I had to think more strategically about it. It actually also meant that I didn't approach some of these people either for investment or to serve on our board, because I wanted to create a little bit of church and state. And I said, it's actually in the best interest of the company if they're not part of this, so that way they're on the outside, and they can continue to provide support to me, because you got to be out there doing this and you still need your support network. And it's hard enough to separate yourself and your business as is.
Yeah, for sure. So what advice would you give to other women who aspire to enter the tech and cybersecurity fields, particularly those looking to start their own companies?
So I think my first piece of advice is going to be broadly applicable to all entrepreneurs. Make sure that you're solving a real problem and there's a real market for it. And it's very tough early on, because if you're solving a new problem, often there isn't a lot of market research, but you should look at all the dynamics around it, because there are a ton of good ideas, but you have to have a good idea at the right time. For us, that was organizations were finishing their DevOps transformations and therefore suddenly starting to get killed by these security bottlenecks because the two weren't aligned. And I think that is, and then especially with female entrepreneurs, go and have that information in your back pocket. The more you become an authority in this, and remember, do not let anybody, you're going to go through all the highs and lows and of the investment advisors, all this sort of stuff. You are the authority in the problem you are solving. And if you really truly understand that problem up front, and you can pull out a number here or a story there or whatnot, it's going to be very hard for somebody to debunk you in that. And they're going to make yourself invaluable to them, right? That they come to you for market advice, that they want to understand this problem and the connections and whatnot. So I think that's the biggest thing that I think women especially don't do, is be their own hype committee. And so remember, you are the expert. Just remember that. Tell yourself you are the expert in the problem you are solving, period, the end, right? There may be other people trying to solve this problem from other things. You are the expert. So don't let somebody rattle you on that. I think also more broadly in tech, you got to just eliminate, I've alluded to it several times, eliminate the view you have of somebody that's working in tech. The really cool thing about tech is there are a lot of really different people in it, and you can be a different person in it too. So do not, unfortunately, as we talked about before, those programs to rewrite job descriptions and get young women involved early in their careers or their education in tech, we're still seeing the effects of that. So be sure to put on your translator and go, okay, hold on one second. I may not have 3 to 5 years coding experience, but I've risen through the ranks very quickly, or I can go take a Python. So some of it over time, right? And then you can go become a mentor and help bring down some of those barriers and encourage writing job descriptions differently. But just remember, you can be a different person in tech too, because we're all different. And that's the cool thing about tech.
Love it. And before we wrap up, looking ahead, what are your long-term goals for Wabbi and your vision for the future of cybersecurity integration?
Yeah, for Wabbi, I think, and it's one of the things in cyber that we tend to see a lot of point solutions, which isn't a bad thing, right? It's technological process improvements. But for Wabbi, the problem that we're solving is universal, and it's only growing the more, unless we suddenly get rid of all technology. And it's because we can't realize, again, back to last Friday, we can't realize the full potential of technology if we can't trust it.
Mm.
And so that's the role Wabbi's playing in, to say, hey, how can we manage risk? And that is a more universal problem that's going to change day to day as different technologies come in. So I want Wabbi to be the platform that solves this problem. And that's going to have lots of different components to it. It's going to get complex, and it's going to grow with our customers. I think that I'm a pragmatist, right? Hey, it could be an IPO, it could be an acquisition. We're not changing how we're building the company. What I care about is that we solve this problem, and whatever that is in the future, and wherever our home is in the future, that we continue to solve that. For the future of cybersecurity, I think what I love about cyber is it's a place of intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
Right. As I mentioned before, right, it always has to be one step ahead of whatever the new technology is. And I think that we're demystifying cyber with folks like yourself that bring me on to talk about it and say it's not so scary, right? Hey, but let's also accept the fact that it's not if we get breached, it's when we get breached. So what's the next thing that happens, right? Do I buy the gift cards and it's bad? Fine, but it's okay, right? We didn't access any sensitive information or anything. And I think the future of cyber is that it is just not from a fear perspective, it's just more baked into our common sense, right? Our daily thought process, either both as individuals and businesses. I think the second thing is that we're going to see cyber become more integrated into the business processes. For a long time, it was a little bit at the kids' table. Hey, you just make sure I don't show up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and you're doing a good job. And cyber is just as strategic. A business looks at risk across multiple perspectives: delivery risk, customer risk, employee risk, etc. And now cyber is part of that equation. And so what's the equation in situation A versus situation B? It's strategic. You're going to see them become more embedded in development teams. I believe by 2027, they're expecting about 40% of application security teams to change their structure so it can partner more easily with development. And I think we're going to see that spread across all function of cybersecurity. When you talk about the future of Wabbi, I say, my goal is that one day the sales ops person is also going to have a login to Wabbi. Well, why would a sales ops person have a login to Wabbi? Well, in your CRM, you have very confidential and PII for customers and prospects. So that's a cybersecurity risk. But how is this sales ops person that has no idea of cybersecurity going to make sure that the right configuration is done from a security perspective? Wabbi's going to deliver that. And that's sort of that integration to the broader business that I think we'll see, in less than 10 years. This is not a pipe dream on that. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I do think that cybersecurity, the word may not be as sexy as people think, but it is such an important part of any business, whether you're in tech or not. Like data, data is valuable. We all have data,
right?
Whether we like it or not, right?
Correct.
Our phones, our computers, whether it's our contacts or our pictures on Google Drives and stuff like that. We all have data out there now. So this applies to everyone, and it's only going to get more and more needed as well.
Exactly. And I think that's my greatest fear in the landscape of cybersecurity is we all have data, it's all out there. And it's going to become easier and easier for people to be manipulated by what is out there. I talk about friendly fraud. Here I am doing a podcast with my face and my voice and everything, right? And it's a risk that I have chosen because the benefits of talking about women in tech and cybersecurity and this problem we're trying to solve outweighs that. And I know I have the safeguards in place that if somebody does call and pretends to be Brittany with something that sounds like my voice, it's unlikely that somebody will respond to that. But we have a generation that's very used to just sort of taking, so Sonia's in Paris. I saw she's in Paris. And, we hear about Instagram hacks all the time and stuff like that. And that's my next level of concern is that we become so trusting of technology that we're afraid to say it could actually pose a risk.
So I was about to wrap up, but I have another question.
Okay.
I forgot about this. So you just made such a good point, and I've actually started seeing this where there are AI tools that are taking people's images and their voices.
Don't use them.
Making it look like it's the real person. So how is AI affecting cybersecurity and all of these little breaches?
Yeah, so 3 ways. One, there's that low-hanging fruit. My number one piece of advice is do not upload your face into one of those free headshot generators because nobody reads the terms and conditions. And what they all say is, I now own your picture for forever and ever. There's lots of cool AI tools where you actually license it and you get to reserve all the information as your own. So read the terms and conditions. But so that's low-hanging fruit, number one. Where AI is really going, people love to talk about the benefits of AI, and there's no doubt, right? I was on a call regards to CrowdStrike. Oh, could we use AI for self-healing on some of these things? Absolutely. It'll help people prioritize better, right? Because it's good about looking at repeated behaviors that we may not pick up on. But where I actually get afraid of it, and this is the nature of my business, that when I'm on an AI panel, everybody else is always like, AI is so cool. I was like, don't use it. No, but use it in the right place and understand the risk. And it gets back to process and checks and balances. The challenge with cybersecurity is remember that cybercrime is an industry that if it was its own country would have the 3rd largest GDP in the world. Wow. So just remember that. So this is a time where the movies get it right and you see a bunch of people sitting at computers. There's doing cybercrime. That is true. It is its own industry. They are run as organizations. And what AI is helping them to do, it is just exacerbating the same issue, is that we talk about why you need to have more secure code. Last year alone, there were more than 26,000 new vulnerabilities. Those are defects discovered. Right. So when you have an entire effectively country, that has the world's 3rd largest GDP, and one person goes, I'm just going to go find this one vulnerability and find all the places where that is. AI is only going to make that happen faster. So this is actually I appreciate the tie-up question. It really comes back to, do you have the right processes and risk mitigating controls, which sometimes is, I accept this risk, but I'm at least doing it knowingly.
Yeah.
In place, because if you don't have that in place now, you're going to be screwed when AI comes into the picture because you will not be able to keep up. And, you talked about startups, right? It's never too early to start. Get those good processes in place, get the good hygiene, and then AI is not going to feel so scary and you will be able to realize the benefits of AI, not just Brittany talking about all the scary things.
Well, Brittany, thank you so much for this chat. I have to say, I so enjoyed myself. It's so weird. Like I always have guests, and when it comes to technology, a lot of them are males, and I've had quite a few females, but I feel like this conversation with you, although it's cybersecurity and people will be like, oh, cybersecurity, I'm like, I'm so hyped up. I'm like, this was so fun.
It's so much fun. I had a blast. This was like so easy. And I love it when it's just a conversation. And, cybersecurity is just a different technology. And I think it got like really sexified because it was, hackers, whatever. And you're like, no. It's just another technology. And it just happens to move in slightly different cadences. And I think that's the fun where as technologists, we just geek out over the problems. It's not, oh my God, I'm afraid of it. You're like, no. How do I now solve this problem? That's why I just absolutely fell in love with it. And I have friends that have come from very different industries, and once you're in cyber, you never go back.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and sharing all of your knowledge as a woman in cybersecurity and all of your experience and knowledge in that space.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure, and looking forward to the next time.
Thank you.
I want to thank Brittany for joining me today and sharing her incredible insights and experiences. Her tenacity as a woman in tech and cybersecurity is inspiring. I hope you feel as motivated by her example as I do. And that's a wrap. To our listeners, thank you for joining me on this journey of learning, growth, and inspiration. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and connect with our community on social media. I'd love to hear your feedback, so leave a review and let me know what topics you'd want to explore in future episodes. Remember, the future belongs to those who embrace challenges, adapt with tenacity, and keep pushing forward. Keep growing, keep pivoting, and most importantly, stay tenacious in your pursuits. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to bringing you more insightful conversations in our upcoming episodes. This is Sonia signing off, but as always, keep chasing your dreams with tenacity.